I was 30 seconds away from locking the clinic when someone started pounding on the door. Not knocking, pounding. The kind of desperate sound that makes every instinct scream, "Run!" My hand froze on the deadbolt. Through the frosted glass, I saw only a tall, swaying silhouette. The pounding came again, weaker this time, followed by a rough, guttural groan, the sound of an injured animal. "We're closed," I called out, hating how my voice trembled. "The hospital's 15 miles north. Please." The word came muffled through the door. "They'll find me there." Logic and medical training clashed hard. This was rural Oregon, 10:45 at night on a Tuesday. I was alone. But that voice, that kind of desperation can't be faked. It was pure survival. I turned the lock. The man nearly collapsed into me, and I struggled to keep him upright. 130 pounds of me against at least 6'3" of muscle. It wasn't a fair fight. Blood soaked through his white dress shirt, the kind of fabric that probably cost more than my monthly rent. His face had gone ashen beneath tanned skin, jaw locked so tight I saw the muscle twitch. He staggered forward, one hand clamped to his left shoulder where red was spreading like a grotesque flower, the other gripping the exam table, knuckles bone white. I dragged him past the threshold. He half fell, half leaned against me, heavy and burning hot. Only then did I notice what panic had hidden. The shirt wasn't just expensive, it was tailored. The trousers, too, perfect cut despite mud and blood. Even the shoes reeked of money, Italian leather, scuffed by whatever hell he'd crawled through to reach my door. "Sit down," I ordered, rushing to the supply cabinet. "Don't you dare pass out. I need information first." "Bullet," he ground out. "Left shoulder, through and through, I think." My hand froze over the antibiotic vials. "You think?" "Hard to check when you're running for your life." For the first time, our eyes met. His were ice blue, too sharp, too alive for someone bleeding out. He frowned faintly. "You're a vet." I set the tray down, my hands suddenly steady as muscle memory took over. "Technically, yes, which means you're about to become my first human patient." Adrian's lips curved faintly, not quite a smile, more like control disguised as calm. "Guess that makes me lucky, doesn't it?" His voice was low, rough, but still carried a trace of humor that didn't belong in a room full of blood. "Lucky depends on how steady my stitching is." I helped him sit upright on the table. He was heavy, towering, easily over 6'3", built like someone who'd lived his life in discipline and violence. But the blood loss was real, his lips pale, breath shallow, skin cold. Under the harsh white light, I cut through the soaked shirt. The bullet wound sat high on his left shoulder, blood blooming dark and wide. It had gone clean through, neat, efficient, almost surgical. "Through and through," I murmured. "Didn't hit bone or artery. You're lucky." "Bullet, through and through," he repeated under his breath, his voice breaking at the edges. I looked up. His ice blue eyes were open, sharp, unnervingly calm. I opened the supply cabinet, laid out gloves, gauze, thread, antiseptic. The metallic scent of blood mixed with the sharp tang of alcohol. "I don't have human anesthetic," I warned. "Do it anyway." No hesitation, just command. I worked in silence. The first prick of the needle made him tense, but he didn't make a sound. I stitched, my hands trembling at first, then finding their rhythm, one careful loop after another, the muscle memory of years taking over. He didn't flinch, didn't curse. He just watched, cold, composed. yet somehow there was trust there. Not trust in me as a person, but in my competence. That strange kind of trust felt heavier than fear. "If you pass out, I won't resuscitate you," I muttered, more to keep myself grounded. "You've got attitude, doctor." "I just don't like people dying during my shift." The last stitch tied clean. I wiped the blood away, wrapped the wound in fresh gauze, the white stark against his tanned skin. When I leaned closer, his breath brushed my cheek, hot, metallic, alive. My pulse jumped. I pretended not to notice. "All done," I said, steadier than I felt. "You need rest. There's a spare room behind the clinic." He nodded, testing his arm with a wince. "I owe you a life." "Then repay me by not dying here." I cleaned the tray, aware of his gaze following every movement. The silence between us was thick, humming with something unspoken. I turned, unable to resist the question that had been gnawing at me. "Who shot you?" He hesitated, then said quietly, "Business associates." "A disagreement." His tone was calm, too calm. The air tightened, danger thickening like smoke. I met his eyes, not the eyes of a liar, but not innocent either. "What kind of business?" He held my gaze, the silence longer this time, heavier. "The kind you shouldn't ask about." The words slid into the space between us, cold and final. Outside, the rain fell harder, wind howling through the trees, and I stood there, staring at the man I'd just saved, realizing that maybe tonight, the door I opened wasn't to save a life, but to let danger in. I guided Adrian into the small back room I used for late shifts, a narrow space with a single bed, a wooden table, and a window that framed the rain-soaked pines outside. The air smelled of antiseptic and wet earth, clean, cold, but faintly human for the first time in years. Adrian sat on the edge of the bed, his hand still pressing the bandaged shoulder. Even bleeding, he sat straight, every line of his body coiled and alert. Not a man recovering, but a predator refusing to look weak. "I left water and antibiotics on the table," I said evenly. "Take 2 before you sleep. Don't move that arm. If it bleeds again, I'm not stitching it twice." He gave a ghost of a smile. "Do you threaten all your patients like this?" "I don't threaten," I said. "I warn." His smile faded, replaced by a quiet exhaustion. I turned toward the door, and then Thor barked. The sound ripped through the silence, sharp, guttural, dangerous. Not the kind of bark he used for squirrels or shadows. This one meant threat. Adrian reacted instantly. He pushed up from the bed, pulling a black handgun from the waistband of his pants. "Stop!" I shouted before I could think. Thor barked louder, claws scraping the floor as he lunged toward the noise. "Thor, no, sit!" I snapped. The German shepherd froze, chest heaving, eyes locked on the stranger. For a second, the world narrowed to a single frozen tableau. A bleeding man with a gun, a snarling dog ready to attack, and me caught between instinct and reason. "Put it down," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "He won't attack unless you give him a reason." Adrian's eyes flicked to mine, then back to the dog. He didn't tremble, didn't waver, just measured the distance. "I don't like things that move near me when I can't move fast enough," he muttered. "You're in my house," I said, "and if you shoot that dog, I'll throw you out bleeding or not." Silence. The rain outside hit harder, filling the pause like a pulse. Then Adrian lowered his hand, fingers sliding off the trigger. Thor's growl softened but didn't fade. I stepped forward slowly, laying a hand on Thor's head. "Down." Thor obeyed, and then, astonishingly, lay down beside Adrian's feet, head resting near his boot. I blinked. Thor never did that with strangers. Adrian looked just as surprised. "Seems he knows I'm not here to hurt you," he said softly. The tension drained from my shoulders. "Thor's instincts are usually right," I murmured. "Maybe better than mine." I walked over and checked the bandage again. The bleeding had stopped. The wound held. "You should sleep. You can stay here tonight. Leave in the morning if you're still alive." He chuckled faintly, eyes half-lidded. "Fair deal." I pulled a thin blanket over him. His skin was hot under my fingers, feverish. As I turned away, he whispered, low and honest, "I don't know why you opened that door, but thank you." I looked back at him, a man of contradictions, danger and restraint, chaos wrapped in calm, and somehow I couldn't bring myself to hate him. When I stepped out, Thor hadn't moved. He was lying beside Adrian's bed, head still on his leg, ears twitching but body relaxed, guarding him. Outside, the storm raged harder. The clinic lights dimmed to a single warm glow from the back room. And as I stood in that narrow hallway, listening to the rain and their steady breathing, I realized something strange. I had let danger sleep under my roof, but for reasons I couldn't explain, it felt like the safest decision I'd made in years. I didn't sleep deeply. My dreams came in flashes. The rain, his voice, the gun, the color of blood under fluorescent light. Every time the wind brushed against the windows, I woke, listening. Nothing but Thor's quiet breathing outside the back room. He'd stayed there all night, guarding a man he'd nearly attacked hours before. That alone should have told me something. My alarm didn't ring, but I woke up on time anyway. As if my body already knew there was no point in pretending to rest. What pulled me out of that shallow sleep wasn't sound, but the smell of coffee, warm, dark, threading through the air and blending with the faint trace of antiseptic, still lingering from the night before. For a moment, I forgot everything until I heard the soft clink of metal from the kitchen. The quiet rhythm of someone stirring. My heart leapt before my mind caught up. Adrian was still here. Outside, dawn was pale and heavy with fog. Thin light filtered through the curtain, scattering across the dust in the air. I threw on yesterday's jeans, tied my hair back, took a steadying breath, and stepped out. The small kitchen glowed with amber light, and there he was, standing by the counter, spine straight, right hand holding a coffee pot, left arm wrapped tight in bandages. He was wearing the old t-shirt I'd given him last night. It clung to his shoulders and chest, making him look strangely at home in a place where he absolutely didn't belong. "You should still be unconscious," I said, trying to sound calm, though surprise slipped through anyway. He turned, meeting my eyes, clear, alert, softer than last night. "Couldn't sleep?" he said simply. "Guilt or pain?" "Both." He poured another cup, and then one for me. "I made extra. Thought you'd need it." The absurd normalcy of it almost made me laugh. A man who'd been shot, a fugitive for all I knew, now stood in my kitchen, calmly making coffee, as if he'd lived here for years. It made no sense, and yet somehow, the senselessness of it made the moment feel strangely peaceful. I took the cup he offered. Our fingers brushed for a fraction of a second. His skin hot, not the comforting kind of warmth, but fever hot. "You need another dose of antibiotics," I said, slipping back into my professional tone. "Took them at 3 a.m. "Painkillers?" "Skipped them. I want to stay alert." He leaned against the counter, watching me with that unreadable, pale blue stare. "You didn't sleep either," I shrugged. "Hard to sleep when a stranger's bleeding on my couch." "I didn't get blood on it," he said. "You were very clear about that." For a heartbeat, silence hung between us. Then both of us let out a faint, reluctant laugh. The sound felt foreign in the small kitchen, cutting through the heaviness of the past 12 hours. I hated how easily his voice could soften the edges of my nerves. I tried to keep my distance, but his calm, steady presence made that distance dissolve like mist. Then came the sound of footsteps in the hallway, quick, firm, unmistakable. I froze. "Jenna," I muttered. "She's early." "Who?" he asked quietly. "My assistant. She comes to feed the animals that stay overnight." I glanced toward the door. "She can't see you here. I'll tell her—" "What are you going to tell her?" he interrupted. "The truth," I said, my voice low. "That you were someone who needed help, nothing more." But before I could move, the front door opened. Jenna stepped inside, her hair damp from the rain, files tucked under one arm, talking about traffic and her neighbor's cat until she saw him. She stopped mid-sentence. "Elara, is there a man in here?" I reacted faster than I thought possible. "My cousin," I said smoothly, a quick, practiced smile on my face. "From Brazil, dropped by unexpectedly. This is Adrian. Rafa, this is Jenna, my assistant." Her eyes widened. "Your cousin? I didn't know you had family in Brazil." "I don't talk about family much," I replied, forcing a light laugh. "It's complicated." Adrian caught on immediately. He stepped forward, offered his right hand, and spoke in a low voice that carried just enough Portuguese accent to make even me pause. "Pleasure to meet you. Elara talks about you all the time." Jenna smiled, her suspicion melting away. "Wow, your cousin's English is great, and you're hot, by the way." She laughed, loud enough for him to hear. "What happened to your arm?" she asked, curious. "Hiking accident," Adrian said without missing a beat. "Fell off a ridge. Elara patched me up in the middle of the night." "I couldn't just leave him bleeding," I added quickly, shooting him a warning look. "He's fine now. He'll leave before we open." He nodded once. "I will." But his eyes said the opposite. He had no intention of leaving yet. Jenna looked between us, clearly sensing the unspoken tension, but polite enough not to dig further. "All right," she said finally. "I'll go check on the animals. That beagle probably shredded his blanket again." When the back door clicked shut, the silence stretched. I turned toward Adrian. "Brazil, cousin?" He set his cup down, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. "You needed someone believable. I made the story better." "I didn't need your help," I said sharply. He tilted his head, his voice lowering, smooth but edged. "Maybe you think that, but you'll see, Elara." He paused, his eyes darkening, serious now. "We have a problem." I crossed my arms, refusing to let him see the unease rising in my chest. "No, Adrian, you have a problem. I don't." He studied me for a moment, expression unreadable, then smiled, the kind of smile that wasn't quite kind and wasn't quite cruel. "I wish that were true," he said. "We have a problem." And I had meant to dismiss it as some vague threat, another cryptic line from a man who thrived on mystery. But the way he looked at me then, cold, heavy, carrying something unspoken, wasn't a joke. It was a warning I didn't yet understand. I opened my mouth to ask, but the back door burst open before I could. The sound was sharp, cutting through the quiet, and both Adrian and I turned at once. A man stepped inside, black suit, rain-wet shoes, hair slicked back, sharp-cut face. His eyes swept over the kitchen, pausing on me for a fraction of a second before locking on Adrian. "Boss," the man said quietly, his voice low and respectful. I froze. That single word hit harder than a gunshot. "Boss." Adrian didn't flinch. He simply tilted his head, shoulders settling with the ease of someone long used to the title. In that instant, every piece of the puzzle shattered and reformed. The old scars on his shoulder, the calm in his pain, the way his gaze always measured exits before people. He wasn't a victim. He was the man others feared. I stepped back, my throat tightening. "Who are you?" Adrian didn't answer. The man, Franco, did. "Someone you were never supposed to know, Doctor." The air thickened, charged. Franco stepped closer, pulling a crumpled envelope from his coat pocket and laying it on the counter. Inside were photographs of my clinic, a blood-stained name tag, and a piece of paper with my address scrawled across it. "They found you," Franco said, "in the dead man's pocket from last night. These were there. The enemy knows you helped the boss. They'll come." I looked down at the photo, my clinic, shot from the dark, grainy but unmistakable. Something inside me went numb. "Why is my name on that?" Adrian's voice came rough and low. "Because you opened the door." I shook my head, breath catching. "I just helped you. That's my job." "It's not just that anymore," Franco cut in, his tone icy. "You're involved now. You're a witness. They won't let you live." I looked between them, two men in my small kitchen, one armed, the other radiating danger. Everything they said pointed to one truth. My ordinary life, the one filled with fur, medicine, and quiet, was gone. Adrian moved closer, voice low but firm. "You have to come with me." I took a step back. "No, I'm not going anywhere. This is my home. I have patients, a job. I can't." "You don't understand," he interrupted, eyes like frost. "If you stay, you die. They don't care who you are. You saw me. That's enough to make you part of this." I drew a shaky breath, trying to keep my voice steady, though my chest felt tight. "What kind of people are we talking about, Adrian?" "The kind like me," he said, "and the ones trying to kill me." Franco reached inside his coat, pulled out a small handgun, and laid it gently on the counter beside the steaming cup of coffee. "You have 10 minutes. We leave now." I stared at the gun, then at Adrian. "You drag me into this and expect me to run away with you. I don't owe you anything." He replied slowly, without anger, just that quiet, lethal calm. "You owe yourself, and I'm paying the debt." I wanted to shout, to refuse, but something in his voice, a mix of command and regret, stopped me. Franco glanced at his watch, impatient. "They'll be here before sunrise, boss." Adrian nodded once. "Get the car. I'll bring her." I turned away, my pulse racing. Thor stood by the doorway, whining softly, as if he understood. I knelt, stroking his head, forcing back the lump in my throat. One night. That was all it took. One reckless act of compassion, and I'd become a target. The fragile line between right and wrong had vanished. Adrian pulled on his jacket, tightened the bandage around his shoulder, and his voice came out rough, heavy with control. "I'll get you somewhere safe," he said. "After that, you can go back, if there's anything left to go back to." His words cut through me like a blade, slicing what little calm I had left. I watched them, two strangers who had stepped into my life, bringing with them the storm of another world, and realized that from this moment on, everything, my work, my home, my name, had become part of their war. We left the clinic before dawn. The wind swept through the pines, carrying the scent of damp earth and exhaust. Franco walked ahead, his gun hidden beneath his coat. Adrian followed behind, slow but steady, the wound in his shoulder probably throbbing again. I said nothing, only listened, to the crunch of gravel beneath our shoes, to Thor's steady breathing beside me. 3 black SUVs waited on the back road. Their headlights were off, only the faint gleam of moonlight sliding across polished metal. When Franco opened the door for me, instinct screamed to run, back toward the clinic, toward the small, quiet life that had made sense just a few hours ago. But then I caught Adrian's gaze, calm, steady, and achingly sad. "You don't have a choice," he said softly. "They'll come for you soon." I clutched the strap of my bag and climbed into the back seat. Thor jumped in beside Adrian, resting his head on his thigh, as if he'd already chosen his side. The door shut, sealing me inside a cage of dark glass and steel. Franco started the engine. The convoy rolled out. The lights of the town faded behind us, swallowed by the curves of the mountain road. Only darkness remained, thick, heavy, pressing in like a warning. I glanced at my reflection in the window, pale skin, wide eyes, exhaustion carved into every line of my face. That woman wasn't me anymore. Adrian sat beside me in silence, his good hand resting on Thor's head, fingers absently brushing through fur like a man searching for a piece of peace he no longer believed in. The dashboard light painted his face in soft amber. Hard lines, focused eyes, all fixed ahead at a future neither of us could see. "I'll keep my word," he said after a long silence. His voice was low, rough, and heartbreakingly honest. 48 hours. After that, you're free." I turned toward him, letting out a humorless half-laugh. "Free? You mean I can go home, keep vaccinating cats and dogs while someone out there is hunting me?" He didn't look back, only replied, "It means I'll make them believe you're not involved. You'll be safe." I wanted to believe him, but faith felt like a luxury I no longer owned. Outside, the forest slid by, tall shadows moving through thicker shadow, like nightmares drifting through fog. Everything was silent except the hum of the engine and the hammering in my chest. Thor lifted his head, licking my hand gently, reminding me that something still felt real. I laid my palm on his back, letting that simple warmth steady me. About an hour later, Franco spoke from the driver's seat without turning. "We'll arrive before sunrise." "Where?" I asked. "A private property in the mountains, safe, isolated. No one but the boss's men know it exists." I leaned back, staring up at the ceiling light, dim, flickering softly. Everything had happened too fast. Just last night, I'd been alone in my clinic. Now I sat between armed men, leaving behind everything I'd ever called a life. "I shouldn't have opened that door," I whispered. Adrian turned to me, his eyes catching the moonlight. "If you hadn't, I'd be dead, and they still would have found you. You saved me, Elara. Now it's my turn to keep you alive." I didn't answer, just looked away, watching the moon break into silver shards on the window glass. Maybe he was right. Maybe choice had nothing to do with it anymore. The SUVs turned onto a narrow forest path. Branches scraped against the sides, their dry sound echoing through the cabin. Franco switched to low beams, and the world behind us dissolved into black. I sat still, listening to the engine's hum, to Adrian's slow, controlled breathing, to the whisper of wind through the cracks. Just 48 hours of safety, but deep down, I knew these next hours would change everything. Dawn was just breaking when the convoy turned onto a hidden mountain path. Rain still clung to the leaves, reflecting the gray light of morning. I sat quietly, watching thin ribbons of mist slide across the window, feeling as if I'd slipped into another world. Silent, secret, far removed from anything I once called life. After nearly 2 hours of climbing, the road opened before us to reveal a tall iron gate, flanked by electronic fencing and slow-turning security cameras. Franco lowered the window, scanned a card, and the gate creaked open. The sound of metal against metal, cold and final, like a door closing on everything I'd left behind. Beyond it stood a modern mansion buried in the forest, its glass walls reflecting the gray sky and the green hush of the pines. Men in dark suits stood at intervals across the courtyard, earpieces glinting, eyes sharp. This wasn't a home, it was a fortress. Adrian stepped out first, his face clear in the early light, calm and composed, as if the chaos of the past night had never touched him. Franco came around to open my door. I stepped onto the slick stones, glancing up at the structure, beautiful, sterile, and utterly out of place in the wilderness. Then she appeared. A woman stood at the top of the entrance steps, tall, maybe in her mid-30s, dark hair tied back neatly, a slate gray suit tailored to precision. Her eyes were sharp, assessing, and in that instant I knew she wasn't the one behind Adrian. She was the one he answered to. "Serena," Adrian said, his voice dropping slightly, touched with fatigue. "My sister." Serena looked at me, her gaze sweeping over me once, not cruel, not kind, just measuring. "You're the veterinarian who saved my brother?" I nodded, forcing calm into my voice. "I just did what needed to be done." Her lips curved into something that might have been a smile, but wasn't. Around here, people who do what needs to be done tend to die early. She turned, gesturing for us to follow. "Breakfast. My brother needs sugar more than he needs attitude." Inside, the mansion was open and flooded with pale light. On the long dining table, breakfast was already waiting. Coffee, toast, and something that looked like an omelet dressed like art. Thor lay quietly by the door, as if even he knew this wasn't a place to bark. Serena took the head of the table, posture straight, eyes locked on Adrian. "You were ambushed. Where?" "Near the western ridge," he said. "Versani." The name hung in the air, heavy. I'd never heard it before, but the way Serena's hand tightened on her cup told me enough. That was the enemy. "We had a truce, Adrian." "Truces don't hold when one side wants a war." Serena leaned back, lips pressing together. "You should stay here for a few days. I'll handle the rest." And her gaze flicked to me. "This good-hearted doctor will be escorted home when it's safe." "No," Adrian said immediately. "She stays until I'm sure they're off our trail." I turned toward him, startled. "You said 48 hours." "I know." His tone was quiet but unyielding. "The conditions changed." Serena laughed softly, a sound sharp as glass. "You must be special, doctor. My brother never changes his plans for anyone." I didn't know how to answer. Her eyes were dissecting, precise, like she could see straight through me. During breakfast, they spoke of things I barely understood. Versani, southern docks, lost shipments, broken alliances. The words pieced together into a dark picture. Adrian wasn't a victim. He was a player in a hidden war I'd never known existed. When the meal ended, Serena stood and looked at me one last time. "I don't know who you are, Elara," she said evenly. "But I do know this. Anyone who gets close to my family never leaves unscarred." Her voice was cool, her footsteps soft, as she disappeared down the hall. And I stood there, realizing that the line between saving someone and destroying myself had already blurred beyond recognition. The next morning, I woke to pale sunlight filtering through heavy curtains. No engines, no voices, only the wind threading through the forest and the faint scent of coffee drifting up from downstairs. Franco had said the mansion had 3 layers of security, absolutely safe. But that kind of safety felt suffocating, like being locked in luxury. I slipped on a light jacket and stepped out to the back terrace. In the courtyard, Adrian was practicing Tai Chi, his movements slow and fluid, yet full of control. The morning light slid over his shoulders, catching the white bandage across his arm. He didn't look like a man recovering from a gunshot, more like someone who'd lived through storms and learned how to balance on their edge. He stopped when he saw me. "You're up early." "I heard the wind," I said, gazing at the green expanse of forest. "It's strange, peaceful but threatening." "Like my life," Adrian replied, sitting on the stone steps and gesturing for me to join him. We sat in silence for a while. Oddly, it felt easy, being next to him in the hush broken only by rustling leaves. He clasped his hands, eyes distant. "My grandfather taught me Tai Chi when I was 10, he said. He believed strength wasn't in muscle or weapons, but in controlling them. He used to say, power means nothing without responsibility." I watched him, realizing that what he spoke wasn't just memory. It was something he lived by. "Your grandfather sounds like a good man." "Not exactly," Adrian smiled faintly. "He was smart, ruthless when he had to be. But he taught me one thing this world forgot. If you let power outrun humanity, you become the beast wearing a man's face." His words lingered. I thought of my parents, gone in an accident the police called unavoidable. I was 17, left with an empty house and a handful of stray animals I couldn't let die. "I became a veterinarian because animals don't lie," I said quietly. "They don't betray, they just love." Adrian looked at me, his expression softening, sincere in a way that felt rare. "You're right. You see what I've lost." For a brief moment, 2 people, a vet and a man made of storms, shared the same loneliness. It didn't need words, it was just there. Footsteps broke the stillness. Franco appeared, his face tense. "We have a situation," he said. "One of the guards betrayed us. He sold the mansion's location to Versani." The air thickened. Adrian stood, calm and unflinching. "Where is he?" "Locked in the basement." "Handle it," Adrian said. His tone was steady and terrifyingly so. I stared at him, waiting for clarification. He didn't give any. "Handle it?" 2 words, clean and deadly. "You just ordered someone's death?" I asked, my voice cracking. "He betrayed us. If I don't act, we all die." "That's not a reason to kill." "In my world," he said, "that's justice." We stood facing each other, close enough to touch, divided by something neither of us could cross. I didn't know if I felt anger or pity, only the breaking of something fragile inside me, the illusion that he could still be different. "I don't belong in this world," I whispered. "I want to go back to my clinic." He was silent for a long moment, then nodded. "Fine, but you'll go with security, no alone trips, no disappearing from sight. And if I refuse, then you'll die halfway there." The words were steel, but his eyes weren't. Behind the hardness was something raw, fear, not of the enemy, but of losing what little he hadn't already lost. And somehow I understood that Adrian wasn't giving orders for power's sake. He was doing it out of desperation to protect the only thing left that mattered, me. We left the estate in the late afternoon, clouds gathering over the ridge like a warning. The air was thick with dampness, heavy with the smell of rain. Adrian kept his promise to let me return to the clinic, but not alone. A full convoy followed, with Franco and 2 other men whose names I never learned. Adrian rode in the lead car. I was in the second, with Franco driving and Thor beside me. The mountain road twisted endlessly, forest pressing in on both sides, sunlight breaking through in shards. I stared out the window, trying to convince myself this was just a short trip, that I was going home. But my heart knew better. Even through the rearview mirror, Adrian's posture told the truth. Alert, rigid, expecting danger. We had driven about 20 miles when Franco frowned. "We're being tailed." I turned. In the rear window, a dark dot appeared at the bend, small but closing fast. "Maybe just locals," I said, my voice trembling. Franco didn't answer. He drew his gun from the side compartment, resting it on his thigh. "No, Versani's car." My stomach dropped. Adrian's voice came over the radio, calm and deadly. "Maintain distance. If they push, split formation." The last SUV slowed, turning back like a guard dog facing a predator. Then gunfire exploded. One shot, then several. Metal clanged, glass shattered. Franco shouted, "Down." Before I could react, Adrian appeared. He'd leapt from the lead car and landed at ours. The door flew open, wind howled in, and in that split second, I felt his weight crash into me, pushing me flat against the seat, his body shielding mine. The world turned to chaos, bullets slicing through glass, shards raining down, Thor snarling. Adrian's arm wrapped around my head, forcing me down, his breath ragged and hot against my ear. "Don't look up," he shouted, voice breaking through the storm of gunfire. Franco fired back, sharp, controlled bursts. The SUV swerved, tires screeching against wet asphalt. I couldn't see, couldn't think, only feel the heavy living weight over me, the pulse of blood and heat and fear. Then silence. The shooting stopped. Only the ringing in my ears and the thick smell of gunpowder and blood remained. "We're clear," Franco said finally, his voice tight. The rear team neutralized them, no survivors. Adrian didn't move. When I pushed at him, he lifted himself just enough for me to see, the dark red bloom spreading across his shoulder, the old wound torn open again. "You're bleeding," I gasped. "I'm fine," he said, though his voice was hoarse and unconvincing. I grabbed the medical kit, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the needle. "Fine? You want to bleed out this time?" He leaned back, eyes steady, absurdly calm. "You're trembling again," he murmured, "but this time it's for me, not for fear." I bit my lip, refusing to answer. My tears fell as I threaded the needle and began stitching the wound, the blood sticky and hot on my fingers. His muscles tensed under my touch, but he didn't make a sound. He just watched me, his gaze softer now, full of something I couldn't name without breaking. "Don't look at me like that," I whispered. "I don't want to remember your face if you die." He tilted his head, a faint smile ghosting his lips. Then I'll live, so you won't have to forget. Outside, the forest loomed dark, the wind crying through the ridges like the earth itself exhaling. Inside the car, the faint dashboard light flickered over his pale face, exhausted, bleeding, but still trying to smile as I tied the last stitch. When I wiped away the blood, his hand brushed my wrist. Not a command, not a defense, just a touch. A silent acknowledgement between two people who had both almost died and had saved each other. For the first time, in the echo of gunfire and the tremor of fear, I understood. What bound us wasn't obligation or accident. It was the fragile truth of survival and of the heart. We returned to the estate under the full weight of night. The sky was heavy with clouds, the wind cutting through the forest, thunder rolling far away. An echo of the ambush still clinging to our skin. Franco drove the car into the garage while Adrian sat silently beside me, his arm rebandaged, his face pale but his eyes steady, still carrying that quiet fire that refused to die. When we entered the main hall, Serena was waiting, arms crossed, expression unreadable. She looked like a verdict already written. "My brother is getting weaker because of you," she said flatly, voice sharp as glass. I froze. Adrian opened his mouth, but Serena didn't let him. "You're letting emotion cloud your judgment. That's not how a luminary heir survives." Adrian let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "If caring for someone makes me weak, maybe you've forgotten what grandfather said about compassion." Serena's eyes hardened. "He spoke of responsibility, not distractions that make you forget who you are." Then she turned to me, her lips curving in a smile that wasn't one. "You don't belong here, Elara. People who dream don't last long in our world." I wanted to answer, but Adrian's hand tightened around mine, a silent plea to stay quiet. "Enough, Serena," he said softly. Something in his tone made her stop. She exhaled, sharp and frustrated, then walked away, her heels striking cold against the marble. When the door closed, only silence remained. Adrian didn't let go of my hand. His palm was warm, heavy, grounding. "Don't mind her," he murmured. "Serena's afraid I'll forget how to survive in a world that punishes the soft-hearted." I met his eyes. "Maybe she's right. You are weaker, not in body, but because of me." "Maybe," he said quietly. "But for the first time, I don't think that's wrong." He turned toward the hallway. "Come with me," he said. His voice wasn't commanding. It was something gentler. I followed without a word. He led me to the library, the most private room in the mansion. The air smelled of paper and wood smoke. A fire burned low in the hearth, painting gold over the shelves that stretched to the ceiling. Adrian poured 2 glasses of wine, handed me one. "You know," he began, voice soft but weighted, "I used to think if I was strong enough, I could walk away. From Versani, from the blood, from the name Luminari. But power always demands its price." He spoke slowly, his eyes on the fire. "I grew up in a family where trust was a luxury. My father died from a wrong handshake. My mother left when I was 15. After that, only Serena remained." He paused, the flames flickering across his face. "I swore I'd end the cycle of blood, but somehow I became part of it." I set my glass down. "No one lives without mistakes, Adrian. What matters is that you want to stop." He looked at me then, really looked, and it felt like he could see the part of me I never showed anyone. "And you, Elara, why heal animals instead of people?" I smiled faintly. "Because animals don't lie. They hurt because they live. Not because they're afraid to lose control. He chuckled quietly, setting his glass aside, moving closer. The space between us shrank until there was only breath. You remind me who I used to be, he whispered. Before I learned how to kill, I wanted to protect. My heart thudded so hard I could barely breathe. Every wall, every rule that separated right from wrong, blurred until there was only this, him. And now, I asked, now I just want to believe I can start again. I didn't have time to answer. He leaned in and the kiss happened, slow, deliberate, real enough to make the world fall away. There was no command, no fear, just two people who had lost too much, finding each other in the wreckage. The fire crackled softly. Its light touched his face, my hair, his trembling hand, as it brushed my cheek like something fragile he was afraid to break. Outside, the forest whispered in the wind, the sound like a distant hymn. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. I felt peace, fragile, temporary, but real. And I knew then that the line between love and loss, salvation and ruin, had never been thinner. That night, I don't remember how I left the library. The fire had burned down to embers, faint red flickers on stone, and my lips still carried his warmth. Adrian walked me back to my room without a word, his hand resting briefly on my shoulder, gentle, hesitant, as if he was afraid of something inside himself. I lay awake in bed, staring into the dark. Outside, the forest was silent except for the faint hum of insects and the restless whisper of wind against the roof. I thought I'd feel peace after that kiss, but the more I thought of it, the heavier my heart grew. There had been something in Adrian's eyes when he said, "I want to start again," something that didn't sound like hope. It sounded like confession. My thoughts spun in chaos, love, fear, trust, all tangled. I went downstairs, craving air, maybe coffee, anything to quiet the noise in my chest. The kitchen light was still on. Franco must have been there recently. On the counter, a phone lit up, screen glowing in the dark. I was about to walk away when a line of text froze me. Operation Mousetrap successful. Target confirmed. I didn't mean to look, but my hand reached for it before I could stop myself. The next message opened automatically. Veterinarian is bait to lure Versani. I froze. For a heartbeat, the words meant nothing. Then they cut through me, one by one, cold and precise. The veterinarian is bait. Me. Air seemed to vanish. My grip on the phone tightened as everything I'd ignored finally made sense. Adrian showing up at my clinic, the ambush, Franco's two sharp stares. Nothing about this had been chance. Footsteps behind me. You weren't supposed to see that. I turned. Adrian stood at the stairs, hair mussed, shirt half unbuttoned, face caught in the dim light. He didn't look shocked. No denial, no excuses, just that quiet, pained look that told me he already knew what this would do. So it's true? My voice broke. I was bait? He walked closer, slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. Elara, listen. I've listened enough. My hands shook. The ambush, the wound, you showing up at my door, it was all part of your plan? He stopped. Took a breath. At the beginning, yes. I laughed, short, sharp, hollow. At the beginning? And after that, what? You just forgot I was a pawn in your little war? I didn't know it would go this far, he said, voice low, almost pleading. I swear, Elara, I never meant for you to get hurt. The plan was only to draw Versani out, not to put you in danger. But I was in danger, I whispered, tears falling. Not from them, from you. He stood still. Even in the dim light, I could see the tremor in his hands. "I was going to tell you," he said. "But after that night, after you saved me again, I couldn't. I didn't want you to look at me and see what I really am." I clutched the phone tighter, wanting to throw it at him, to make him hurt the way I did. But instead I asked, "Did it ever occur to you that I deserved to choose?" He said nothing. His silence was the most painful answer of all. I set the phone down, stepping back toward the door. "I can't stay here. Elara," he rasped. "Don't go, it's not safe now." "Safe?" I let out a bitter laugh. "You used me as bait, Adrian. You killed that word." I turned and climbed the stairs, his voice following me, raw, breaking. But I didn't look back. The door shut behind me, and I leaned against it, trembling like someone who had just woken from a nightmare. Only this one was real. Morning came gray with fog. Franco was gone. Serena was nowhere to be seen. I packed a small bag, just enough to leave, and walked to the gate. Adrian was already there, waiting, his face drawn and hollow from a sleepless night. "Don't go," he said quietly. "They're still looking for you. I can protect you." "I don't need your protection," I answered, my voice steady for the first time. "I just need you to stop lying." Wind swept across the courtyard, cold and sharp. I walked past him without a word. But as the iron gate closed behind me, his voice broke through the silence, cracked, almost desperate. "Elara, I chose you, not the plan." I didn't turn around, because if I did, I knew I'd never be able to leave. I left the estate at dawn, when the mist still clung to the mountain air. My chest felt hollow, too empty for pain. The road ahead stretched gray and endless, like a ghostly ribbon winding through silence. Franco had sent 2 guards with me. They drove an old black SUV. I sat in the back seat, clutching a small bag, a handful of belongings, and the last of my resolve. I'd sworn never to return, never to see Adrian again, but part of me still trembled at the thought of his eyes that morning when I walked away. Rain started falling halfway down the slope, soft, steady, tapping against the glass. I rested my head on the window, imagining the clinic door opening, the smell of antiseptic. Thor's bark echoing down the hall, a simple dream, fragile, impossible. Because deep down, I knew Versani wasn't finished. Then a sound like the sky tearing apart. The world exploded in fire. The SUV shuddered violently, the roar of a rocket shattering the quiet. "Down!" one of the guards shouted. Before I could react, the lead car erupted ahead of us, a ball of flame swallowing steel and screams. The air filled with the stench of burning fuel. Our tires skidded. Franco yanked the wheel hard. The car spun off the road and crashed into a ditch. My head hit the window, stars bursting in my vision. Then a hand, rough, urgent, yanked me from the seat. Gunfire cracked through the trees. Someone shouted my name, and then a heavy blow landed at the base of my skull. Darkness swallowed everything. When I woke, the world was cold. Concrete, metal, silence. My hands were tied behind me, wrists burning from the tight plastic cuffs. The air smelled of rust, gasoline, and damp rot. I tried to move, but each struggle only made the bindings bite deeper. The door opened. A blinding white light cut through the dark. A man stepped in, tall, dressed in a dark suit. Handsome in the way danger sometimes is. He didn't need an introduction. The arrogance in his smile was enough. He belonged to Adrian's world, but not his side. "Good evening, doctor," he said in a low, smooth Italian voice. I'm Adriano Moratoni. I assume you've heard of me. I didn't answer. He smiled, circling me like a collector admiring his prize. You're not what I expected. Adrian usually surrounds himself with killers, not healers. Maybe that's why you're exceptional. He stopped, pulled something from his jacket, a photograph. I knew it instantly. Me and Adrian in the library, caught mid-kiss, the firelight soft on our faces. My eyes closed, his gaze on me. That look I once thought was real. You see, Adriano said, holding the photo up, you are his weakness. My throat tightened. What do you want? It's not about what I want, he said, sitting across from me. It's about what Adrian wants. I don't care about you, Elara. I care about what you make him do. You're using me, I whispered. Exactly. He stood, motioned to the guard at the door. The metal slammed shut, plunging the room back into darkness. His footsteps faded, leaving only the echo of iron and my own uneven breath. Images flickered behind my eyes. Adrian's smile, his touch, his words before I left. I chose you, not the plan. Now that promise felt like a knife turned inward. I finally understood. I wasn't just a target for Versani. I was the last piece in a war built on betrayal and love used as leverage. Tears slipped down my face, not from fear, but from the cruelest truth of all. I had believed him, and belief in their world was the one thing that always got you killed. I had lost track of time. The faint light slipping through a crack in the door painted sickly patches across the stained wall, just enough to tell night from day. Outside, boots paced in steady rhythm. My wrists burned from the plastic cuffs, but my mind stayed sharp. The door opened. Adriano walked in, carrying a satellite phone. He sat across from me, the same casual smile on his lips. Time to let him know you're still breathing. He pressed the speaker button. The voice that came through froze the air in my lungs. Adrian, hoarse, tired, but steady, too steady. Say what you want, Moratoni. Adriano grinned, eyes flicking toward me. $5 million and half your southern territory. In exchange, the girl lives. Silence. I could hear Adrian's breathing, rough, restrained. If you touch her, then you lose everything, Adriano interrupted softly. I know Adrian, she's your weakness. Tears burned behind my eyes. I wasn't afraid to die. I was afraid he'd do something reckless to save me. Adriano leaned closer to the phone, voice like a blade. You have 24 hours. After that, I'll send her back to you, zipped. He ended the call and tossed the phone onto the table. His gaze lingered on me, amused. He'll come, he said, and when he does, you both die, each in your own way. He left, slamming the door. Silence swallowed the room again. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. Adrian will come. I knew it. Whether I wanted him to or not, I knew he wouldn't leave me here. But I also knew this. If I waited, I would become exactly what they thought I was. Bait. I took a slow breath, forcing my shaking hands to steady. The dim light glinted on the plastic restraints. I recognized the type, the same kind I used at the clinic to restrain injured animals. I'd learned how to cut through them once, by accident. I leaned sideways, pulling the cuffs against the jagged edge of the chair leg. Each scrape tore skin, drawing blood, but I didn't stop. I counted breaths, 4 in, 6 hold, 8 pull. Then a soft snap. The tie split. Blood ran down my wrist, hot and real, freedom, even if temporary. I knew I wasn't stronger than them. I had no gun, no allies, but I had something they didn't, a reason to live. Not to run, not to hide, but to stop being the wound. And I promised myself, when Adrian came, I wouldn't be his weakness. I'd be the one who survived. I didn't know how long I'd been in that warehouse. Hours, maybe days. The air smelled of rust and gasoline, thick and metallic, pressing against my chest until breathing hurt. I sat curled on the floor, wrists raw from the plastic cuffs I'd cut through, eyes fixed on the steel door ahead. Every nerve in my body was tuned to the same quiet dread, waiting for something, either a miracle or another nightmare. And then it came, gunfire. Far at first, then closer, then too close. Bullets whistled through the air, voices shouted orders. My heart lurched. I'd know that pattern anywhere. Precise, fast, merciless. Adrian was here. The warehouse door blew open with a thunderous blast. A wall of fire and smoke erupted inward, throwing shards of metal across the room. I shielded my face as the heat slapped my skin. Figures stormed through the haze, shouting commands. And in the middle of it all, him, Adrian, drenched, his face smeared with blood and dust, his eyes burning like twin blades through the chaos. Elara, his voice tore through the noise, pulling me back from the edge of fear. I jumped to my feet, but before I could take 2 steps, a hand clamped around my throat from behind. A voice, low and smooth, hissed at my ear. "Not so fast, Bella. He's no hero." Adriano. He yanked me back, pressing the barrel of his gun against my temple. His breath reeked of smoke and whiskey. "One more step, Luminary, and I paint this wall with her blood." Adrian stopped. His gun rose, steady, his face turned to stone. The chaos behind him froze. When he spoke, his voice was cold, measured, every word falling heavy as steel on concrete. "Let her go, Adriano, now." Adriano laughed softly. "You give orders? While my gun's here, right on her throat?" "She's not prey," Adrian said, his gaze never leaving mine. "And you're betting on the wrong game." Adriano's smile twisted. He pressed the muzzle harder against my skin. "Hear that, Elara? That's the man you trust. He'll shoot, even with you in the middle." My breath caught, but I managed to whisper, hoarse, trembling, "He won't let me die." Adriano chuckled. "We'll see." Adrian took 1 step closer. Behind him, Franco gave a signal, but Adrian lifted a hand to stop him. "Between you and me," he said. "No one else." Adriano tilted his head, mocking. "You still talk about honor in our world, Adrian? How quaint." "Maybe," Adrian said quietly. "But I keep my word, let her go, or you'll die slow. That's a promise." The air thickened. I could hear my heartbeat, loud and frantic. Adriano's grin faltered, his focus flickering for just an instant, and I knew that was my moment. I loosened my body, went limp, and threw my weight sideways. He wasn't expecting it. His grip faltered. "Adrian!" I screamed. The gunshot split the air. It was deafening, final. Adriano staggered, blood bursting from his shoulder, the gun flying from his hand. I fell, the world spinning, and Adrian was there, his arm wrapping around me, pulling me close as debris rained down. "You okay?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "You came," I whispered, tears blurring my vision. "I knew you would." He didn't answer, just held me tighter. Behind us, Franco's voice cut through the chaos. "Charges! They rigged the place. We need to move." A sharp metallic click echoed, faint but unmistakable. Adriano bleeding out on the floor, his hand found the detonator. His lips twisted into a ghost of a smile. Then the world erupted. The explosion ripped through the warehouse, fire swallowing everything. Heat scorched my face as Adrian dragged me up, shouting, "Run!" After the explosion, there was only white light, blinding, endless. No sound, no sensation, just a blur of heat that felt like the world itself was melting. My heartbeat thudded in my ears, faint and distant. Then, through the ringing silence, I heard Adrian's voice. "Hold your breath, Elara. Close your eyes. Don't breathe." I didn't think, didn't question. His hand tightened around mine, and he pulled me forward, through smoke so thick it felt solid, through fire spilling from the collapsing steel above us. Each step was a battle. Smoke filled my lungs, my throat burned, my feet slipped on the ash-slick floor. Adrian never let go, even though his breath came harsh and broken. "Almost there," he rasped. "Don't stop." Another explosion went off behind us, the shockwave throwing us to the ground. My hand slipped, but Adrian twisted, rolling over me, his body shielding mine. Metal crashed, flames roared like an animal unleashed. He grunted, sharp and pained, as a shard of steel grazed his back. I tried to push him off, but he held me down, his breath hot and uneven against my ear. "Don't look back," he whispered. The air turned black with smoke. I couldn't see, couldn't tell where the exit was. Only the firelight dancing in his eyes, 2 flickers of life in the chaos. He pressed his hand to my shoulder, forcing me lower. His face was blurred by the haze, but I could still see him, too clearly, too painfully. "Elara," he said softly, voice shaking but resolute. "If I fall, you keep going. Promise me." I shook my head, tears mixing with sweat and ash. "No, not this time. I'm not leaving you." He gave a weak laugh, blood glinting at the corner of his mouth. Stubborn as always. The ceiling gave way, sending sparks flying. Adrian grabbed me, rolled us aside. The blast hit, the floor buckled, and he fell over me again, shielding me completely. "Adrian," I cried, my voice breaking. He didn't answer. His weight pressed down on me, heavy and real. I touched his cheek, hot, slick with blood. I shook him, desperate. "Hey, don't you dare die. You still owe me a life, remember?" A faint sound escaped his throat. His eyes fluttered open, a small, tired smile on his lips. "Always you, saving me." "Shut up," I sobbed. "Just breathe." Outside, rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder, 1,000 drops drumming against the burning metal roof. I dragged him through the wreckage, my body screaming, lungs raw from smoke. Flames clawed at our backs, but the moment our feet hit the wet ground, the rain wrapped around us like mercy. We were out. He lay still, breathing shallowly, eyes open, clear and strangely peaceful. I cradled his head in my lap, my hands trembling as I brushed his hair from his face. "It's over," I whispered. "It's over, Adrian. We made it." He lifted a bloodied hand, placing it gently against my cheek. His voice came weak but warm. "You have no idea what you just did. You saved me from myself." I leaned forward, resting my forehead against his, tears spilling down to mix with the rain. Around us, the fire burned itself out. Smoke drifted upward, carrying the last embers of destruction into the storm. And there, in the ruins, 2 people who had walked through hell held on to each other, breathing, shaking, alive. I didn't know what would come next, maybe danger, maybe peace. But in that moment, in the heart of the ashes, I found my redemption and his. I woke to the smell of antiseptic and the steady beep of a monitor, a rhythm that felt too calm to be real. White ceiling, pale light, the faint salt of sea air drifting through an open window. It took a few seconds to understand. I wasn't in the fire anymore. I was in a private clinic somewhere far from war, where everything still dared to breathe. When I turned my head, Adrian was on the bed beside mine, his face pale, bandages wrapped across his chest and shoulder, but his chest rose and fell. He was alive. Relief swept through me like warmth after winter. I wanted to call his name, but my throat was raw. Instead, I reached my hand across the small space between our beds, a short distance, yet it held everything we had survived. The door opened. Franco stepped in, his shirt stained with dried blood, eyes hollow from exhaustion, but a rare smile touched his face. "Versani's dead," he said. "Serena led the strike herself. It's over, Elara." I looked at Adrian as if waiting for him to hear it, and he did. His lashes stirred, then his eyes opened, blue and steady, though softer now. The storm inside him had finally broken. "He's dead?" Adrian rasped. Franco nodded. "Serena finished it. You don't have to go back." Adrian exhaled, the sound heavy, the sound of a man laying down a crown of thorns. "Then it's done," he murmured. I took his hand. "Was it worth it?" He was silent for a long time before whispering, "No." I called off the trap long before it began. I never meant to use you. But it was too late. Versani knew, and everything burned. I squeezed his fingers. "No more secrets, Adrian. If there's a future for us, it has to be built on truth. I need my life to be mine. If we ever have children, they deserve a choice." He looked at me, and for the first time there was no mask, only sincerity and a quiet kind of surrender. "I know, and I promise." He brushed a strand of hair from my face, his smile faint but real. "I'll step down. 5 years, Serena will run everything. I just want to live." "With me?" I asked softly. He smiled again, breath weak but warm. "If you still want me." I didn't answer. I just held his hand, feeling the pulse beneath the bandages, fragile but alive. Outside, waves whispered against the shore, as if the ocean itself was washing away the blood, the noise, the ghosts. Serena entered then, sharp as ever, but her voice gentler when she looked at him. "You've done enough, Adrian. Let me handle what's left." He nodded, then turned to me. "I've been fighting my whole life, Elara. Maybe now it's time to learn how to live." I leaned close, whispering against his ear. "Then let's live, for real, this time." The morning light streamed through the window, soft and gold, spilling across the 2 beds. 2 survivors of a war neither had wanted, now lying side by side, caught between life, death, and the fragile mercy of redemption. 6 months later. Summer came early. The hills around the small town shimmered under sunlight, and my clinic opened every morning as if the nights of fire and gunfire had never happened. The scent of disinfectant mixed with dried grass, Thor's barking echoed from the back lot. Life was ordinary again, so ordinary that sometimes I wondered if I had dreamed it all. Jenna set a tray of files on my desk, eyeing me with a teasing grin. "You've changed, Elara. Not the I survived death kind, the I finally know why I'm alive kind." I laughed softly. "Maybe I just got more sleep." She shook her head, chuckling. "Nope, that's not sleep. That's someone." Before I could respond, the door opened. Adrian stepped inside. He wore a plain white shirt, gray trousers, dust on his shoes. The sunlight caught on his hair, softening his features. No black suit, no shadows of power, just a man standing in a doorway, with a weary smile and a stack of papers in his hands. You didn't call first, I said, trying not to smile. I know, he replied, setting the papers down. It's the debt clearance for your clinic and a $500,000 fund for animal rescue, under your name, no ties, no conditions. I said nothing. His eyes softened, careful, almost shy. You're free, Elara. Stay or go. It's your choice. I looked at him for a long moment. For 6 months I'd thought about freedom, about love, about what existed between us. Finally, I whispered, I'll stay, but not because of you. He blinked, startled. I stepped closer, brushing my fingers against the faint scar on his shoulder. I'm staying because I want to, because I choose to. If you leave, I'll be fine, but if you stay, that's even better. His smile spread slowly, real, warm, like sunlight, breaking through after a storm. That evening, Serena hosted a small dinner at the seaside villa. She raised her glass, her tone half command, half tenderness. To my brother, may he finally learn what peace looks like. Franco laughed. Jenna was there too, and I sat quietly, feeling the fragile warmth of something I'd never had before, family. Midway through dinner, Adrian stood. He didn't speak much, just took my hand and pulled a small silver ring from his pocket. I can't promise to be perfect, he said softly, but I can promise to live right and to live with you. I laughed, tears spilling before I could stop them, and nodded. Later, on the rooftop, the ocean breeze tangled in my hair, and the stars stretched endless above us. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, his voice low against my ear. Thank you, he whispered, for opening that door that night. I turned to look at him, smiling. If you hadn't knocked, I'd still be stitching up animals, healed on the outside, hollow inside. He leaned down, and under a sky scattered with stars, we kissed, not as savior and survivor, not as penance or redemption, but simply as two people choosing each other in a world that no longer demanded blood to prove love.